Hello everyone, this is my video series on how to create an LCD marquee with Raspberry Pi and Retropie. Just wanted to give you a little background on how I went about doing this. So back in 2018, December 2018, I purchased a Street Fighter 2 arcade 1-up cab, and I watched a video for ETA Prime on how to modify it with a Retropie. Immediately bought the equipment needed to modify the machine, got the joysticks and everything. But the one thing I liked about the arcade 1-up in general is when you started a game, it showed you the layout of the controls and what they were before the game started. So I started working on a script to do the same thing on a RetroPie. So I posted on the RetroPie forums on what I was doing, and other people chimed in. But there was one particular user, and I hope I'm saying his name right, Texicate. He was also wanting to do some kind of program that would display on a separate 5-inch screen the controls themselves and what the layout, so that basically when you started a game, this 5-inch screen would have the controls laid out, and the person could just look at the controls and do and play the game. That changed my whole idea of what I wanted to do. So I was like, I wanted to create an LCD marquee, and his code allowed you to do that. I was always Hypermarquee, Hyperspin. I always liked how the marquee could change on an LCD marquee when you selected a game, and with Texicate's code, I was able to do that. To create an LCD marquee to be used with RetroPie. Now how I set mine up, I bought a 14.9-inch stretched LCD monitor. This video series will not show you how to set that up and use it. That'll be a separate video series. This series is only going to show you how to set up the Raspberry Pi and RetroPie to display an image on another monitor when you select a game. And then once that's done, then the other video series will show you how to set up a stretched monitor and to build a frame so you can put it in your arcade 1-up. So this is a checklist of what's going to be needed. First off, you're going to need a wireless wired connectivity. So how this works is essentially you have your RetroPie, and then you have a secondary Raspberry Pi. Okay, and basically what the RetroPie does is it sends a command to that secondary Raspberry Pi to display the image. So you have two Raspberry Pis, one with RetroPie, one with your images, which would be the marquee images. So you have to have, and it's best to have wireless connectivity. You can have wired, but either way, you have to have some kind of network connectivity. Next thing you're going to have is a Raspberry Pi with RetroPie installed and set up. This video is not going to show you how to set up RetroPie on a Raspberry Pi. It's assumed that you already have all that set up, but we will talk about some other files you have to edit in order for you to send the command to change the marquee on the second Raspberry Pi. And of course, you're going to need a second Raspberry Pi to display the images. Now, this doesn't have to be a full-fledged Raspberry Pi 3 Plus or anything like that. As you can see in the picture I've displayed, I used the Vilros Raspberry Pi 0W Complete Starter Kit, which has wireless capability. And as you can see from the picture, it has everything that you're going to need for that secondary Raspberry Pi, which includes a USB hub, HDMI cable, power cable, SD card, and of course the Pi 0W that you're going to need in a heat sink and a case. And I put the link in Amazon for that. It's about $35. But if you have a spare Pi laying around that you're not using for anything, you can definitely use that as well and save a little bit of money. You're also going to need a micro SD card reader. This is going to be needed because we're going to set up the SD card on a Windows machine, so we're going to have to plug that in. We're going to put the SD card in that, plug it into a USB port so we can configure the SD card. Of course, a monitor for a secondary Raspberry Pi. Again, there'll be another video series explaining how to use the 14.9-inch stretch monitor. This video does not do that, but you're just going to need a secondary monitor for that, of course, for the second Raspberry Pi, so that we can make sure everything's set up and the images are being transmitted correctly. You'll need a USB keyboard. When we first bring up the second Raspberry Pi, there's some things we have to do on the Pi itself. That includes getting the IP address. Once we get the IP address, we'll be using a program called Putty on the Windows machine to remote into it. Just makes things a little easier, but you can also do everything from the second Raspberry Pi. All the commands will show you. You can do that from the second Raspberry Pi if you want to. 64 gig micro SD card. Now you'll notice that if you buy the kit, it comes with a 16 gig micro SD. I just go with a 32 or 64 gig just so I don't run out of space. I don't think you'll run out of space on 16 gig, but if you start adding more and more marquee or images to the SD card, it may fill up. So just to be safe, I use a 64 gig. If you want to use the one in the starter kit, that's up to you. And then finally, access to a Windows computer. Again, we'll be setting up the SD card from a Windows computer. We'll be also running Putty to remote into it. We'll also be running an FTP program to copy the marquee files over. So with that all said, once you get all that, all those items on the checklist, then we can start setting up the SD card with Raspbian Lite. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to format the SD card. What we're going to do is we're going to put Raspbian Lite on there. We don't need the full version of Raspbian. We just need the Lite version, which is basically just the command line version of it. We don't need a full GUI. So we got our SD adapter and we got our 64 gig card. Again, if you want to use the 16 gig card that came with the kit, go ahead. I just use a 32 or 64 gig just in case. Gives me enough space to put more files on there if I want more marquee files. 16 gig may be fine, but just to be safe, I just use a 32 or 64, and in this case, it's a 64. So with your SD adapter, what we're going to do is look for the micro slot on there, as you can see, and what we're going to do is we're going to plug this in there. It goes like that. Make sure you put it in the right way. Goes in that way. Okay, so it's in. So now once we got that in there, then we're going to plug it into our computer. Just like over here. Just plug it into a USB slot. And Windows should detect it. And then we're ready to install it. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to see is that when you plug in the SD adapter, you're going to get a message possibly from Windows that says you need to format the disk in whatever drive that comes up. You can go ahead and cancel that, and then it's going to come up and say it may not be accessible. Again, just click OK to that. We know it's not going to be accessible because it's Raspbian, or it's in Linux, or it may not even be formatted. So in those cases, you can go ahead and close it and cancel any of those messages that pop up. So once you get it plugged in and cancel all those messages, we're going to go ahead and we're going to install Raspbian Lite. So we want to go to their website. We want to go to the Raspbian website. Here we go. Open it up. Bring this over. Okay. So the website that we want to type in to get the Raspbian website is http www.raspberrypi.org/downloads/Raspbian. This is going to bring us to the Raspbian website. Now what we want Raspbian Buster Lite. So what we're going to do is we're going to download the zip file for that image. and it's going to be about 435 meg, which is pretty low. So we're going to download the zip, or you can download it from the torrent if you want, but I usually just download it from the zip file. It's going to ask you to save it. Save it. I usually just save it to my desktop, and then save. And we're going to go ahead and save that. In my case, it's saying it's going to take a few hours to download. So we'll just wait for it to complete downloading. Okay, so now it has downloaded. So we're just going to leave that there for right now. The next thing we need to download is a program called, I hope I'm saying this right, Balena Etcher. This is going to be used to write the image to the SD card. So the next website that we want to go to download that software is https://www.balena.io/etcher. Then we want to hit enter. This is going to bring us to the website. Since we're using Windows, we want to download the Windows version, so we're going to click on that. And again, it's 139 meg. So what we're going to do, we're going to run it. We're not going to save it. We're just going to run it. You can save it if you want to. I just usually run it and install it. And it's going to go through installing it. Or I should say it's downloading it at this point. Okay, so once it downloads, it opens. You're going to get to the installation of it. So we're just going to agree. It's going to install it. And once it's complete, it's going to open it up. And the first thing it's going to ask you is to select an image. So we're going to minimize Internet Explorer here. So we're going to go to our zip file and we're going to extract that image. So we're going to right click on it, extract all. Just put it in a folder with the same name, extract it. Give it a minute or two for it to extract that file. And it is done extracting and it's going to open up the folder. It's okay, we can close that. So now we're going to select the image. So we're going to click select image on here. And we're going to go ahead and find that image. So we put it on the desktop, we put it under the folder, and there it is right there. So we're going to select it. It should be about 2 gig. So we're going to select and open it. Then once you select the image, it's going to say select target. So we're going to select our target. It should automatically go to the drive that is assigned to your SD card reader that you put in. So in this case, it's JK. Large drive, so we're just going to, so that is correct, so we're going to continue. We're going to select it, and then we're going to continue. And then finally it's going to say flash, so we're going to click flash. And it's going to come up with a message. It's going to say it's unusually large, and that's fine. We're just going to continue with that message. And then you'll get the warning from when you get a user account control message from Windows. Just say yes to that. And as you can see, it's starting. Again, if it comes up with a message that says insert a disk, just cancel it and continue on. Just cancel any messages that pops up when it says insert a drive for K or J. That's just Windows storing up the messages. As you can see, it is flashing. Usually takes about, up to 3 to 5 minutes to completely flash. So we'll just wait and let it finish flashing. Okay, so it's finishing, it's validating. It's going to take a few minutes to validate after that. So we just give it a few minutes to do that as well. Okay, so it's almost finished validating. And again, you're going to get messages that say you need to format the disk before you can use it. Do you want to format? You want to just cancel these messages. And you'll get that location is unavailable. Again, that's fine. We're just going to click OK to that message as well and cancel anything that says you need to format it. Because again, this is it's got Raspbian on there now, so Windows can't read it. So therefore, it's going to try to format it. So we just want to cancel all those messages. But once you cancel all those messages, you'll get the flash complete message that successfully flashed. And now we can bring this over to the our secondary Raspberry Pi that's going to be used to display the marquee images. Okay, so we've installed the Raspbian light on the SD card, which is, we still have it right here. I have my Raspberry Pi with Retropie installed over here. It's on this screen. I have my Raspberry Pi 0W with all the components that I need. And this is the monitor I'm going to use to connect it up. And I have my USB keyboard with the little wireless little connector on there. So essentially what we're going to do, we're going to hook up the Raspberry Pi here. So essentially we're going to take the SD card out of here, okay, and we're going to stick it in the Raspberry Pi. As you can see, we put the heat sink on there, and then we're just going to plug in the I believe it goes this way, so it just goes in there. Label up. It can only go in one way. Once it's in, it's in. And then what we'll do is you can just put it in the case. It should just pop in. Just make sure everything's lined up and everything. Once you get it in there, a little bit difficult to get in, but once it's in there, it's in there. Okay, so it just snaps in there, and there you go. It's it. Okay, so now we're going to plug up the, I've already got the HDMI plugged into the monitor. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it in, the HDMI into the the Raspberry Pi Zero here, and plug that in. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in, you have the two micro USBs here. So basically the left one is for, try to get a different view here for you. So right here you'll see that the left one here, that's going to be where we're going to plug in the USB hub. The right one's going to be power. So essentially I'm going to plug in the camera down again here. So I'm going to plug in the USB hub here. Okay, and then I'm going to plug power to it. Now once I plug power up to it, it will power up. So once I got the power, I'm going to plug it up. There we go. As you can see, it's powering up. So once it starts powering on, it's going to go through the boot process here. It's going to start all the services, and we'll just pause here to let it go through all that stuff. See right there in that command line, it's going to resize the boot volume there. Oops, sorry. Okay, so the first thing it's going to do here, it's going to ask you to log in. This is just by default. We're going to fix this, but for right now we're going to log in. So the default, so I'm going to plug in my keyboard into the USB port on here, which is right here. So I can get my keyboard. Should have done this in the first place, but we're going to plug it up there. Okay, so now the default login is Pi. And then the default password is going to be Raspberry, even though it's not prompting us. And then it starts up. It's going to display some things, and then it comes up to a command prompt. So once it comes up to a command prompt, we're going to be ready to go. So now that we're at the Raspberry Pi prompt, the first thing that we want to do is we want to auto log in to the Pi. So we're going to go into the Raspberry Pi configuration program to do that. And I will basically, when I type in commands, I'll have a separate window that's up that will show you what the command is. Please note that with Linux, all commands are case sensitive, so you have to type them in exactly as they appear. This is not like Windows, where if I type in a folder or a file name, let's just say cat, for example. And it does in Windows, if it's lowercase cat, if it's uppercase cat, and when you go to that folder or file, it doesn't matter. Windows sees it as cat. Linux is different. So basically, if I type in a folder that's all uppercase cat, and then I try to browse to it going to lowercase cat, Linux will not detect it, because Linux, again, is case sensitive. You could have a folder called cat in uppercase and lowercase. So that is possible. So again, please note, when these commands come on the screen, type them exactly as they appear. With that being said, so we want to go into the configuration program tool. So we want to type in sudo space raspi -config and then hit enter. Okay, so this is going to bring us to the configuration screen. What we want to do is since we want to auto login, we want to go to boot options. So we're going to go down, scroll down to the option 3 and hit enter. And then we're going to, next we want to go to option B1 desktop /CLI command. So we're going to hit enter on that. And then once we get to that one, we want to go to B2 console auto login. So we want to just hit our cursor down and hit enter. And it's going to perform an action. And once it does, we'll go back to the previous screen, and we want to tab over, so we go to finish and hit enter. And then it's going to ask if you want to reboot. Say yes. And this is going to reboot. And once it comes back up, we should be able to get, it should auto log in without having us type in anything. So we're going to give it a minute to boot up. And as you can see, it auto logged in without prompting us for anything. So that's the first step that we have set it up for auto login. Okay, so we've set up the auto login process so it automatically logs in. So now we want to set up the wireless. So in order to do that, we're going to go back into the configuration tool. So we're going to type in sudo space raspi-config. That's going to bring us back into the screen. So when we get up there, you'll see the screen here. In this case, now you want to go to option number 2, network options, and hit enter. And then what you want to do now is you want to go to option M2, which is Wi-Fi. Okay, now here you're going to have to, we're going to select the country that we're in. In this case, it's the United States. So we're just going to page down all the way down to United States. Get up there. There we go. And once we select United States, we're going to hit the tab key to select OK and then press enter. Now it's going to say Wi-Fi country set to US. Hit enter. Now it's going to ask to enter the SID ID. So the SID, you enter your SID that you of your wireless connection. So I'm going to enter mine, which is so once you enter it, again, hit tab so it selects OK and hit enter. And then it's going to ask you to enter your paraphrase, which is your password. So we're going to type that in as well. And then again, hit your tab key, go to OK, and hit enter. And with that, your wireless should be set up now. And should be back to your configuration screen. And then hit tab until it goes to finish. And hit enter. And then that'll bring you back to your command prompt. Once you're at your command prompt, we're going to go ahead and reboot it. Just to make sure everything entered correctly. So you're going to type in sudo, all lowercase, sudo space reboot. And that's going to reboot the machine again. And then we'll give it a few minutes, and once it comes up, we'll be able to get the wireless IP address. And once we're back at the command prompt, we're going to get the IP address of the computer, the Raspberry Pi. So we're going to type in the command sudo space ifconfig space WLAN 0. And once we do that, you'll notice the second line there where it says iNet, that is your IP address. Go ahead and write down that IP address. So after we get the IP address, the last thing that we want to do is we need to set up SSH so we can remote into the Raspberry Pi. So what we need to do is we need to go into the config file again. So we're going to type in sudo raspi-config. And just so you know, you'll see that the text I'm typing in is overwriting the command prompt. That's fine. It just sometimes it doesn't go directly to the end of the command prompt. So when you type it in like that, you'll notice like the $sign. Don't worry about that. Just click enter. And then we're back to the screen here. So what we want to do now, we want to go to interfacing options. So scroll down to number 5 and hit enter. And then we'll see where it says SSH. So we want to go there and hit enter. It's going to ask us, do we want to, would you like the SSH server to be enabled? We're going to hit the tab button to yes, and hit enter. And it's going to take a moment or two for it to set that up. So we just need to wait. Eventually we'll get a message that pops up that says the SSH server is now enabled. So we're going to click, we're going to hit enter to OK. We'll get back to the configuration screen, and we're just going to go to finish. And we'll be back up to a command prompt right there. So essentially now we've got our IP address, we got auto login, and we set up SSH so we can remote into the machine. Now we can go back to our Windows machine and install Putty so that we can just remote into the machine and type in all the commands and the additional setup from there. It just makes things a lot easier than having to do it from the from a computer standpoint, from you having to sit here doing it on the Pi, but also from me for giving instructions. It's easier for me to do it from a Windows machine than to sit here with the camera pointed at the monitor. Okay, so now that we've gotten the IP address of the Raspberry Pi 0 that's going to hold the Marquee image files, we can go ahead and we can now remote access to that Raspberry Pi on our Windows computer. And we're going to install Putty on the computer. Now, if you don't want to install Putty and you just want to type in these commands on the Raspberry Pi itself, that's fine too. I just find it a little bit more convenient to do it on through Putty. So the first thing we need to do is install Putty. So we're going to open up browser, and we're going to browse to https://www.putty.org. And when you get to that page, you're going to see the download Putty screen. Then where you can download Putty, click here, and then we're going to click on that. And you're going to see your package files. I have Windows 64-bit, so I'm going to click on the 64-bit installer. And it's going to ask me what I want to do with it. I'm just going to run it. Again, if you want to save it, you can. I just run it. And once it's running, you'll get the prompts to install it. I'm just going to click next, install it to the defaults. I always put a, you don't have to put the shortcut on your desktop. I usually do. And then click install. And you'll get the message from the Windows security. And I don't need to read the README file, so we're just going to finish that. And so once that's done, we can close out of there. It should see the Putty icon on your desktop. So we're going to open that up. So what you're going to do now is you're going to enter the IP address that you got from your Raspberry Pi 0. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in. and then you're going to click open, and you can leave everything the same. Click open. First time you run this, you're going to get an error. You're going to get a message, a security alert about SSH. Just click yes to that message, and then once you have Putty open, you'll see the login. Again, the login is Pi, and the default password is Raspberry. And once we do that, we get the command prompt, and we're going to maximize this window. Now, the first thing we want to do when we get to this prompt, we want to make that IP address static, because we don't want DHCP to assign another IP address, because then you're going to have to go into your setting file once we get to that point on your Raspberry Pi. We're going to have to go back and always change that password in the file. So we don't want to do that, so we want to make this IP address static. So we already got the IP address, we need to get the gateway next. So basically, we're going to type in a command to get that. We're going to type in sudo space route space -ne, and we're going to hit enter. And you'll see the gateway there, and you'll see what it says gen mask. Okay, and you'll also see where the interfaces are, where it says WLAN. That's the wireless card. So you want to write down the gateway, and you want to write down what's under the gen mask. Okay, so go ahead and write that all down. So get that all written down, and I'm just going to clear my screen by typing clear, so my network information isn't out there for the whole world to see. Okay, so we're back at the command prompt. Now we're going to edit a file. We're going to first make a backup of it. So the file that we're going to edit is called dhcp-cd.config. So the command we're going to type in first is to back up that file in case we have to restore it. So we're going to type in sudo space cb space /etc dhcp-cd.conf space /etc dhcp-cd.conf .backup. I type. You can type it in all caps as well. When you hit enter, you'll go back to the command prompt. So that just makes a backup file of the config file. So now we're going to edit that config file. So we're going to type in sudo space nano space /etc /dhcp-cd.conf and hit enter. And that opens up a file editor and the file that's opened is dhcp-cd.conf. Now when we're in here, we're looking for a set of commands. We're looking for a section that says example static IP configuration, which is right here. As you can see, they have pound signs next to everything here. What those pound signs indicate is that they're remarked out files, that remarked out comments that aren't processed. When the file's processed, it just means that they're not going to be, those lines will be overlooked. So we need to set those files up correctly. So we're gonna go to the end of this line here. We're gonna hit enter. So the last line here is static domain name servers. We're going to click there, hit enter. We're going to try to actually, you gotta move the arrow key down. You gotta move the cursor down. The mouse won't work. So we want to get to that point, hit enter. And so we're going to type in a few lines, and it's going to be listed in the prompt here. We're going to type in interface WLAN 0 and hit enter. Static space IP underscore address equal, and then sorry if I spell address right, equal, and then your IP address that we got from your Raspberry Pi. And then we're going to type in static space routers, I should say. And that's going to be your gateway IP address that we got previously. And then finally, type in a line static domain underscore name underscore servers equal 8.8.8.8. So once those 4 lines are typed in, we're going to save the file. We're going to press the control key and press the letter O for write out. It's going to ask the file name to write to. It should be dhcpcd.conf. We're going to hit enter. And then we're going to press the control key and press X to exit out of sudo. And now we're going to go ahead and just reboot the computer to be safe. So we're going to type in sudo space reboot and hit enter. And now over here, you're going to get a message over here saying the remote side unexpectedly closed network connection. That's fine, because if you look over to the your Raspberry Pi, you should see it rebooting. And once it comes back up, we'll connect via Putty again. Okay, so now that the Raspberry Pi is rebooted, we're going to go back into Putty. We're going to type in our IP address here. Open, and we should be able to open it typing in the login Pi Raspberry, and we are back in. And now the IP address should be static. Now that we've gotten that in, we're going to install some software. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a git update command for Raspbian packages. So at the command line, we're going to type in the command sudo space apt -get space update. And we're going to hit enter, and it's going to get some updates, and it's going to take a little bit for this to install. So we'll probably pause this to let those updates install. Okay, so once everything's done, you'll come back to the command prompt. So the first thing we're going to install is a program called FBI. This is the Linux frame buffer image viewer, and this is what's used to display the image on the screen. So to install that, we're going to type in sudo space apt-get space -y space install space FBI and hit enter. And it's going to download the package, and it's going to install it, and it'll take a few minutes, and we'll pause. And now FBI is installed. Back at the command prompt. I just want to make a note that the install for FBI took about 3 to 5 minutes. And it shouldn't take that long for these other applications, but just be patient. You are on a wireless connection. It's a Raspberry Pi Zero, so just when these things install, just be patient. I'm pausing it in between just to save, so you don't have to sit there for 3-5 minutes watching it install. Just be patient while it's installing. So once you're back at the command prompt, the next thing we're going to install is Image Magic. And this is going to be used, it's a image editor, and this is going to be used to resize images in case they don't display properly. So we're going to go ahead and install that. So the first thing we're going to do, again, we're going to type in, we're going to do an update again. So we're going to type in sudo space apt-get space update. And again, this probably isn't needed, but I just run it anyway just in case. It'll go through it all again. And we'll pause it for a moment. So the update's done again. So now we can install the Image Magic. So to install Image Magic, we're going to type in sudo space apt-get space -y space install space image MAGICK, all one word. And I spelled it wrong, so we're going to go back. Image Magic K. Okay. And then hit enter, and it will start downloading to install Image Magic K, and we'll pause while that is going on. Okay, so it finished. It took maybe about 3 to 5 minutes for it to install everything, but now that's set up. Now we're going to create some directories to store the script file and the some of the marquee files, or image files for that matter. So we're going to create some folders. So essentially at the command prompt, we're going to type in the command. It's going to be mkdir and then space and the word bin, bin, hit enter. And then we're going to type in mkdir space marquees, hit enter. And then we're going to type in mkdir space marquees / arcade. And enter. So now all three of those so we created two folders, bin and marquees, and under marquees we create another folder called arcade. Now to see if those folders are there, we're going to type in ls and hit enter. And that's going to show us down below that it did create a folder called bin, and it could create a folder called marquees. So now the next step is going to be to download the script file that will listen for the command from the Raspberry Pi. So to copy over the files, we're going to close out of Putty. We don't necessarily need to use Putty anymore. So now we're going to install an FTP program called WinSCP. This is going to allow us to copy files over to the Raspberry Pi with the graphical interface, and it also lets us edit some other files as well. It's just a little bit easier to edit in that program than it is with Putty. So basically, we're going to open up Internet Explorer, and we're going to browse to https://win.scp.net/eng/index.php. Then we hit enter, and we get to the WinSCP site. We're going to go to download now, and we're going to scroll down a little bit, and we're going to go to where download WinSCP. In this case, it's 5.15.5. We're going to click on that, and it's going to ask us what we want to do with it. We're going to run it and get the user account control message. Just click OK to that. And here we are. We're just going to take all the defaults. We're going to accept typical installation, commander view, interface, and then install it. And we're going to uncheck the open get started page, and we're just going to launch WinSCP. So we're going to click finish. And the first thing, and I'm going to go ahead and close out Internet Explorer and kind of arrange these windows a little bit. There we go. So the first thing it's going to ask you is the host name, which is your IP address. So we're going to go ahead and type that in of your Raspberry Pi. And then, of course, the username is Pi and password is Raspberry. And we're going to click Login. The first message you're going to get, it's going to say potential security breach for SSH. We're going to just click Update. And there we go. So now you see where we've created our bin and marquee folder. This is the right side is your Raspberry Pi that you're connected to. The left side is your actual computer. So with that being said, so once we got that open, we're just going to minimize that for now. And we're going to go to a website to get the files that we'll need to run the Raspberry Pi as a host, so that the Raspberry Pi can run the command so that it can display the images on the monitor. So we're going to go ahead and minimize this. So to get the files that we need, we're going to have to download a zip file that has all the files in there. So we need to browse to Texacate's website. So we're going to type in https://github.com/texacate/visual-retro pi dash control dash x and hit enter. Now bring us to Texacate's GitHub site. And Texacate is the one that created the code to make this possible. Again, he created this code to display the controls on a separate monitor, so that when a person was playing, he knows what buttons to press and what the buttons do. And I'll tell you, if you have some time, I would read his document, his wiki page that describes everything that's going on here. For our purposes, we're only going to use a few files from here. But we're going to have to download the whole zip file. So over here, you'll see a button that says clone or download. We're going to click that drop down, and we're going to go download zip. So we're going to click download zip. It's going to ask you where you want to save it. We're just going to save it, save as. We're going to save it to the desktop, and then save. And it's a very small file, and it should be very quick to save. So once it's saved, we're going to close out, and we're going to minimize Internet Explorer. We're going to find a file on our desktop. We're going to right click on it, extract all, just keep it as a default file, extract, and there we go. So now we go into the folder Visual Retropie Control Maps Master, and there's another folder in there with the same name, and then we go into it and we see the files in here. Now the file that we're going to copy over to the Raspberry Pi is the one called simpleserver.py. That's the only file that we're going to copy over. All the other files, there's 3 other files that we'll copy over to the Retropie Raspberry Pi, but the only one we want to copy to the Raspberry Pi that's going to display the images as the simpleserver.py file. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of move this over. We're going to bring over our Win SCP folder that we, Win SCP program we brought over. So as you can see here, we see the folder called bin. So we're going to double click on that, and we're just going to drop and drag that simpleserver.py file over. So we're just going to drop it in there, and there it is. It's on the Pi now. Now we're going to edit this file. So we're going to right click on it, and we're going to select edit, and then we're going to select over to the right, we're going to select edit again. So as you can see, it brought up the edit file. The line that we want to look for that we're going to change, where it says image dir, we're going to change that from button images. We're going to change that to marquees. Okay. And once we change that, we're going to click the save icon in the upper left corner here. And then we're going to close it. And now we have that simple server Pi file there. And that will, that's the Python program that's going to run to allow the Raspberry Pi to run the script so that the Retropie Raspberry Pi can send information to that Raspberry Pi so that it can display the image. So now that we have the simpleserver.py file out there, now we got to create a service for this to work properly so that it will run. So what we need to do is we need to minimize, we're going to go ahead and minimize bin. I'm sorry, not bin. We're going to minimize Win SCP. Going to minimize this folder, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start Putty again. So we're just going to double click on Putty. Again, type in the IP address. Hit enter. Again, login is, I think we already know what the login is now. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to create a, as I said, we're going to create a service for this program. So at the command prompt, we're going to type in sudo space nano space /lib lib /systemd /system and we're going to simple server dot service. Okay, and then we're going to hit enter, and that's going to open up editing software. So we're going to type in some lines here, and it's going to be about 6 to 8 lines. So you'll see a display on here that'll show you what lines you have to type in. But we're going to start by putting a bracket and type in unit and closing the bracket. Then we're going to type in description equal simple server, hit enter, and then we're going to type in the word after equal, and we're going to type in multi-user dot target, and then we're going to hit enter twice. We're going to put another bracket, we're going to type in service, close the bracket, and we're going to put in type equal idle. So we're going to type in, the next line we're going to type in is exec start equal /usr /bin /python 3 space /home /pi /bin /simple server.py, and space 2 greater than signs space /dev /null and ampersand, which is shift 7. And we're hit enter twice again, and do bracket install, close bracket, hit enter one time, and then we're going to type in wanted by equal multi user dot target. Okay, so once you have everything typed in, we're going to hit press Control and O to save the file. It's going to say, do you want to say file name to write? You know, simple live systemd system simple server dot service. We're just going to hit enter, save it, and then we're going to hit Control X to exit. So now we're back at the command prompt. We do have to do one other thing here before we continue. So we have to set the permissions on the file we just created so that it will execute. So from the command line, we're going to type in sudo space chmod space 644 space /live /system d /system /simple server dot service. It should come back to the command prompt that we changed. So now we're going to configure the system MD, and to do that, we're going to type in a few commands. The first command we're going to type in is sudo systemctl space daemon dash reload, I'm sorry, hit enter. Take a minute for it to load. There we go. And then finally we're going to type in sudo space systemctl space enable space simple server dot service and hit enter. And it's going to say it's going to take a minute. It's going to say create a sim link to that. And once we do that, we're going to reboot the Pi. And so we're going to reboot that. We're going to type in sudo restart. I'm sorry, it's sudo reboot. My bad. of course, you're going to get a message from Putty saying that it closed network connection. You can click OK to that and click close, and we'll go over to the server to I'm sorry, you also get a closed network connection for the WinSCP if that was still open, so we can just close that out as well. So once it's been rebooted, we can actually go into Putty again to check to make sure that this ran. So we're going to open up Putty again. Type in the IP address of your Pi. And we're going to log in. Okay, so now we're logged in. We're going to maximize the screen. So now we're going to check to make sure that service we created is actually running. So we're going to type in a command to check on that. So we're going to type in system ctl space is-active space simple server dot service, and then hit enter. And as you can see, it says it's active, so we know it's running. And now that we know that it's running, we pretty much almost completed everything on this Pi. We do still have to copy over the Marquee files, but the first thing we got to do is we've got to copy over some system files over to the Raspberry Pi that's running Retropie. Okay, so we're at the I'm now at my Retropie Raspberry Pi that I have Retropie installed on. So what we need to do is, again, we need to set this up for SSH. So we need to make sure that's installed. So if we go to Retropie, and in the settings over here, we want to go to RASPI config. That's going to start up the Retropie. Ignore all the under voltage stuff. That's just an error. But anyway, here we go. So again, we want to go to interfacing options, which is option number 5. And we're going to go to select, and we're going to click OK to that. And then it's going to, and then we want to go to the second selection, which is SSH, enable, disable, remote command access. So we're going to select that. And wait for that to come up. And it's going to say, would you like to enable, like the SSH server to be enabled? We're going to select yes. And then it's going to say SSH server is enabled. And then we're just going to click OK. And then we're going to go over to finish. And we're going to exit back out to the screen. Now, what we want also is we want to get the IP address of this, of the machine. So we're going to scroll down to show IP. We're going to hit that. Give it a moment to do its thing. And it's going to come back up here, and it's going to tell you what the IP address is of your machine. So write that down where it says your IP is. You're going to write down that IP address. And then we're going to click OK. And that's going to bring us back to the screen. So now that we have the IP address and we've set up SSH, we can go back to our computer to remote into the machine. Okay, so now that we're back to our Windows computer, we can go ahead and close out of Putty. Close that out. Close the session. Okay, so now we're gonna want to run the WinSCP program again. So we're just gonna do a search for it since it didn't put an icon out there. There it is. Okay, it's gonna probably ask you, hey, do you want to delete temporary folders? I just say yes. Go ahead and delete those. And then it's going to come out and ask you for the host name. So the host name, we're going to type in the IP address for your Retropie Raspberry Pi. So that's the IP address we just recently got. So we're going to type that in. And again, the username and password should be the same unless you changed it. I'm going to click login. Again, you're going to get a message asking it's connecting to an unknown server. Just click yes to that. And there you go. You should see on the right hand side, you should see your folder structure for your Retropie Raspberry Pi. It may not look exactly the same as this, but it should look something similar to this. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to now copy the some additional files over from what we downloaded, that zip file for the from Taxicate's website. So we're just going to move this over a little bit. We're going to go to our folder for Retropie Control Maps Master. Go into that and then go into the subfolder. So the first folder we want, the first file we want to copy over is the file called simpleclient.py. So, and we're going to drag that directly under folder structure home Pi, which is what we should be in, and there's a folder called bin. And then we're just going to copy and paste that in there. And so you got simpleclient.py. Now we're going to go ahead and edit this file. So we're going to right click on it, go to edit, and you'll notice where it says the host. Okay, this is the IP address of the Raspberry Pi that we have the Marquee files on. So not the Retropie IP address, but the IP address of the second Raspberry Pi. So for the host, we want to change that. So we're going to change that right now. Just highlight it and type it in. Once you have it typed in, go ahead and click the save icon. And once it's saved, you can go ahead and close the file. So now that's set up. So now we want to copy two more files, run command -on end and run command -on start. We need to copy these to the folder structure the OPT folder. So basically, we're going to click the folder here. That'll bring us back up to click it a few times. So we get this list here. So we're at pretty much at the root of the Retropie. So what we want to do is we want to click on the OPT folder. Then we want to double click on the Retropie folder. Then the configs folder. The all folder. Now what we're looking for are these the two files we're going to copy over are called run command -onend.sh and run command -onstart.sh. These two scripts run, the onstart one runs before the game starts, and then the run command -onend runs after you exit the game. Now, if you already have files of those names in here, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to edit those files and add the text that's in here. So essentially, if I, for example, if there's already an on start in there, you would have to edit this file, for example, right click on it and just go to, I'm going to open it with Notepad. Bring it over. So this is what it looks like. You would have to copy and paste this in there. You'd have to copy these lines and put it at the end of your text file. And the same thing with if you had the onend.sh, you'd have to do the same thing. But since we don't have those files in here already, we're just going to copy and paste these two files over. So we're going to highlight both of them, and we're just going to drag them over and drop them in. And we don't have to edit these files, so everything's good on there. So with those two files copied over, now we can concentrate on getting everything's set up on the Raspberry Pi. Everything's set up on the second Pi for the Marquee images to be displayed. So now all we have to do is get some Marquee files over to test to make sure everything's working properly. So now you can get the Marquee files from anywhere. There's different sites that have them, or you can go on the internet to get the Marquee files. This is a trick I do. So if you've already scraped your Retropie to get like images and things like that, you can grab the Marquees from there and put them on the other Retropie. So in order to do that, So we're going to double click the path that we currently have up here. We're going to double click on that, and we're going to type in a path here. So the path that we're going to type in where those files are stored is /home /pi /dot emulation station. And then once we do that, we're going to hit enter, and that's going to bring us to the emulation station. Then we're going to double click downloaded media, and as you can see, we have the arcade. Those are the ones we're going to copy over. But if you double click on it, you'll see that there may be a few here, and what we're concerned about are the marquees. So if I double click marquees, you'll see that it has pretty much marquees in there for everything. But so we're going to go up a folder, and we're just going to drag that marquee folder down to our desktop. So we're just going to drop and drag it, and it's going to copy over the files. Now, depending on how big these files are, it may take a little time. Just give it a few minutes to copy over the files. Okay, so we have our marquee files copied to our desktop. So if we open up the folder called marquees, you'll see that all the little files for the marquees are there. So we're going to close that out for now. So now that we've got our marquees, we got to copy them over to the second Raspberry Pi that's going to display the images. We can close out this session here because we don't need it anymore. This is the session that's connected to the Retropie, so we can close that out. And once we close that out, it's going to ask us for a new session. So we want to type in the IP address for the secondary Raspberry Pi that's going to display the images. And then type in the username and password. And click login. Now we're logged in. Now you see where it says the marquees, so we got that. But what we want to do is when we go into marquees, we want to drop everything into arcade. So when we double click arcade, there's nothing in there. Go to our marquee files over here. Open up that folder, select all files, and just drop them into that arcade folder. And this will take a moment to do. Okay, so as you can see, all the marquee files that I had on my Retropie are now on the secondary Pi. So the final thing that we have to do is we have to create a default graphic file that's displayed whenever you're not playing the game. And this is just it can be anything basically that you want to display on there when the game's not there. Also, this file will be displayed if you do not have a graphic file for your game, a marquee file for your game. So what I did was I just created one with the Retropie on there. It has to be just default.png. So where you copy this file, you don't copy it into the arcade. We're gonna go up one level. So we're gonna double click the folder there, and we want to drop it into home Pi marquees. So we just want to drag that file in there. And it's there. And so we're so with that file put in place there, we're now ready to test to see if everything's going to work properly on both Pis. Okay, so as you can see, this is there's my Retropie and Raspberry Pi, and over here on the second monitor is the secondary Raspberry Pi that's going to display the images. I went ahead and rebooted the secondary Pi. I cleared the screen so it doesn't show my IP information. But basically, when you first boot up the secondary Pi, nothing's going to show up. Nothing will show up until you actually activate a game. Or you start a game up, and that's when it will display on the screen there. So let's do that now. So let's just start Alter Beast. Since I got that up and running. And we're going to start it. And what should happen, hopefully, and there you go. It just put the Altered Beast logo up there on the second screen. And then once we exit the game, what should happen, it should go to that default graphic file that we created. I'll just move that out of the way there. So let's exit the game. And once we exit the game, it puts the default Retropie out there. So now I'm going to show you a game. I know I do not have a marquee for 88 games. So what should happen when I start 88 games, even though it's showing up there? Because again, that's on the Retropie, not on the marquee. But I know the 88 games marquee is not on the secondary Pi. So when I start that game up, it's going to keep. It's going to put back up the default image. So basically, any game that you do not have a marquee file on there, it'll just display the whatever default image you put out there. And then if you have one that matches the ROM name, it will display it. So again, we'll just go out here for a moment. And we'll try another game here. Let's go to, I don't know, we'll go to Asteroids. Or Asteroids Deluxe, I should say. So when we start that, there you go. It's displaying it. So that's about it for this video. If everything's set up, everything should be working. So basically, my next video will be how to set up a 14.9 inch stretched monitor, marquee monitor, and to put a frame around it so that you can replace your marquee on your Arcade 1-Up. I should have that done in a little bit, probably about a week or two. But for right now, this will, whatever monitor you want to hook it up to, this will send the image to that second monitor. So thanks for watching, and look for my other video soon. Thank you.